Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Decision Hour. I am your host, Adam Bird, and I got a real treat for you guys today. And I'm going to start this show off a little bit differently than I normally do. I'm going to ask a question, and the question is, what happens when you put two Army Ranger veterans and one of the world's most talented photographers together in a room? We're going to find that out today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my guests, Dan, Tom, and Bo on. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
How's it going? Thank you for having us.
Guys, I want to dive right into this a little bit because we got a lot to cover today. But why don't you each give our listeners a little background about yourselves? Dan, let's start with you.
Sure. So I grew up a military brat. My dad was in the Air Force. Lived all over the country and in other countries. Went to high school in Southern California. Bo and I have grown up being best friends pretty much from when we were 5 years old because he lived 2 doors down from my grandparents. So every time I would visit, he was right there.
Nice.
And then when we moved to California, we went to high school together. So, obviously our lives took a different path initially. And I joined the Army, served in 2nd Ranger Battalion for 6 years, deployed 6 times, 3 to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, got out. Went in the National Guard, which is where Tom and I kind of crossed paths. We served together teaching OCS cadets how to be not morons and how to find themselves in the woods. But we taught that for a couple years together. And while I was going to school, went to Appalachian State University, got my undergrad and a few master's degrees. And then we all crossed paths again in 2020. It was just kind of a natural thing where we ended up coming back together to work on a project.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, so I I enlisted straight out of high school on I actually signed in on my 18th birthday to the absolute, please don't do this of my entire family. This is a mistake. And I'm like, well, I'm making it. And then ironically enough, exactly 1 year later, so that was 1999, April 7th, and then April 7th, 2000, I landed at 2nd Ranger Battalion. So Dan and I didn't actually serve in the Rangers together. We were kind of ships passing in the night. 04 was when I got out from regimental headquarters. So all the guys that were team leaders, about to be squad leaders, were his leadership. He was in SECO, which, we forgive him for. And I was in BECO, but so it's actually really funny. And then one of the guys in the book, Vince Vargas, is actually kind of this middle piece of it where I went, one of the guys that Vince served with, who unfortunately was KIA at one point, Rick Barraza, and I went to RIP together. So there's this weird sort of fun connective tissue. But yeah, I got out, I went to school at the University of Illinois, graduated with my degree in poli-sci, and then I was one of the founders of Ranger Up, the lifestyle apparel company. Did that for 8 years. Did some safety and security consulting, did some other small business stuff, was obviously a part of the Range 15 movie project, which it's amazing being back in the veteran space. That's either the greatest thing ever or the most infamous thing ever. No one has a, milk toast opinion about that one. So, and then, yeah, like Dan said, we linked up when I was in the National Guard doing OCS stuff in North Carolina, and he had just gotten out of the Ranger Regiment, and I was explaining to him that he had to really realign his perspective to the point where if you our training area is still to this day, I believe, right next to the JSOC compound. Okay. And so that fence, it says don't touch it, don't do anything. And every single time they would go out on their pre-land nav course, we'd be like, don't go near the fence. Don't touch the fence. Don't do anything with that fence. You might get shot. Because literally they will shoot you if you try and hop that fence. They don't care, right? Wrong day. And so I'm explaining his brain. I'm like, so we're about to do this. You cannot emphasize this to these candidates enough. And he's kind of giving me the side eye. And our mutual friend Steve is telling him the same thing. He's still kind of whatever. Hand of God, Adam. What, 15, 20 minutes, Dan?
Yeah.
We were releasing 15, 20 minutes. MPs roll up. You guys gotta. People back in the woods. And I'm like, yeah. Pulls out his phone, shows us the pictures from the camera of them touching the fence. Can you bring him back? Yeah. It's you idiots.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me like I told you, dude, like they are exactly this smart, you know. He was much better working with them than I was, so he got him right eventually. But that was the first weekend we worked together. It's just
I love it.
don't touch the fence.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, Tom. And Bo, what about you, sir?
Yes, sir. I'll keep mine pretty short. It's hard for me to measure up to these two guys and their accomplishments, but I have a background in fashion photography of a little over 12 years from Los Angeles to New York, working with some of the top modeling agencies and brands out there. And basically that transitioned into me wanting to cold turkey that career. I just got tired of working in that space and that industry, and kind of came back to my roots of being a small town desert kid, and basically just fell in love with fine art photography. And so most of my work now is, producing fine art photos for high-end clientele homes. And that actually was in conversation with Dan when I decided to move my life from California to North Carolina in 2020. And Dan and I got connected, and that's kind of where the start of the idea of the book came about in this project that we'll get into more in the episode.
I love it. And ladies and gentlemen, Bo's being very humble right now.
Yeah.
Bo
Yeah, he
really
is.
is like one of the world's most talented photographers
I don't know about that.
that are out there. And we'll make sure that we'll put your link up too, because your stuff is truly amazing.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So, all right, gentlemen. The reason why we're here today is to talk a little bit about a project that you guys have come together on. And this year marks a particular anniversary of something that's happened that hits near and dear to everybody's heart here in the United States. And that this year's the 20th anniversary of 9/11, September 11th. Mm-hmm. And I think as that draw nears, and it's funny, it's hard not to almost get choked up thinking about it, because up until talking with you guys, it hasn't been really mentioned and whatnot. And this is I think it's a very important topic to discuss. So I'm going to let you guys kind of take it from here, but talk about this project that you guys what is this project first off? What is it that you guys are putting together?
So last year, 2020, I'm sure this was the case for a lot of people, but, we're closed off in our houses, stuck with our own feelings and thoughts and whatever we're trying to process from our past and everything else with it.
Right.
And, up until 2020, I had kind of pushed off a lot of my veteran experiences and just, not aligned with it, not really taken into account, and just push it off. But for whatever reason, I started getting more and more connected into the veteran community, and I wanted to do something to give back. I didn't know what it was yet. I had a bunch of ideas. None of them were really resonating. And it just happened to be, I think, honest to God, fate that it happened. But Bo decided to move across the country. And in that process of moving across the country, he had just done a photo series for
Heroes and Horses.
Heroes and Horses.
Yep.
And so we were kind of talking about that project, and I was telling him about how I wanted to do something different. And then he was bringing up how he wanted to take photos from his journey across the U.S. and create a photo book out of it. And I was like, well, I want to give back to the veteran space. And he was like, well, I do too. I want to do another something for the veteran space. And so we just kind of kept talking about it. I was like, dude, do you realize next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of 9/11? And that's going to be the 20th anniversary of the Global War on Terror? And he was like, I had no idea. So I was like, this is what we need to do. Mm-hmm. I was like, we need to capitalize on this being the 20th anniversary. We've got to bring it to the forefront of people. We've got to put these stories on record and written down so that they don't get lost. Because one thing that the previous generations weren't very good at was making sure to record the stories as they happened. Oftentimes they were long after the wars where people finally started coming around and telling their stories. And so that was kind of the idea behind the photo book, was we wanted to capture these veterans and have them tell their story, get it written down, and make sure that these are stories that can inspire other veterans to tell their stories and share it with their friends and families, to get out there and do podcasts or write books or whatever the case may be, but get it written down and get historical records of everything that we've endured, because this is the longest war that our nation has ever been involved in. And there's a lot of nuances that will be lost with history if we don't get it written down. So that's what we did. And we started embarking on this journey. I'll let Bo kind of tell his part of the journey across the U.S. multiple times, but we're really excited about the book because it's not just about their combat stories, but it's much more about their transition story. So for each veteran in the book, we have 71 from all different branches, all different ranks, grades, times in service, spans within the 20 years where they served in that timeline. Brothers, sisters, father and son, husband and wife who've all served together. It's kind of incredible landscape of veterans that we have. But we don't just tell their combat story. We tell their story from their perspective of their transition as well. We focus really on that because one thing that we've gotten out of this book, the common theme we're hoping people get, is that there is absolutely something to learn from every veteran. And what's interesting, we were just talking about this last week, is even though we have a common thread that we all served and we all, went to combat, everybody took something slightly different from it. And somebody has something unique to share. And that's what we wanted to get across in the book.
I love that. And real quick, Bo, before you get started here, those of you that are listening to the show right now, that means you're already on the internet. Open up another browser, and you can actually pre-order the book right now, Jim, if I'm not mistaken. If you go to 20yearwar.com, 20yearwar.com, I'll have that link in the comment sections and whatnot in the show description as well. So please continue.
Yeah, thank you for that. My journey as the photographer, the book, it was a roller coaster of emotions. I started, I think, first photographing veterans back in, I want to say, October of last year. The first trip I did is I flew to Washington State and photographed a woman over there. And then when I came back, Dan and I were kind of preparing how many veterans total we wanted in the book. I think at first we were thinking of like between 60 and 70. And then we dwindled it down to about 50. And then we planned the first push, which was a cross-country road trip, driving from North Carolina to California and then back again in under a month. And I was basically, I think, just a few days away from leaving, and we only had about maybe 7 or 8 veterans on board. And we just kind of were hoping to get a little bit more signed up, because to make that big of a push, I want to try and stack up as many, interviews and photos as I could. And I think while I was on the road, Dan was communicating back and forth with me of like who to meet up with, at what time, what city. I drove across 42 states, over 16,000 miles. And after that trip, after that month, we actually had about 31 veterans from that trip that came on board. And then by the end of this whole, I'd say, project of photographing veterans for about 4 or 5 months, we have 71 total. So we kind of went back up to our original goal.
Wow.
So it was funny because they were at 7 or 8, and Dan called me and he's like, "Hey, I've got this idea." And I was in the same boat really that Dan was, especially after being at Ranger Up and after Range 15, and just the shift in the veteran space that was going on at that time. I was burnt out and I wasn't particularly happy with some of the things that I saw. And I mean, I was wrestling with some of these things where I know what I intended to do at Ranger Up, making goofy videos and this, and then to see sort of this vet bro culture of, that just didn't really fit what I knew the esprit de corps to be, to see the, and really it's like they call it vet bro culture, but really it's the airsofters who came in and co-opted it, who never served, who never get the joke, right? Like, let's just call spades here. Like, it's not usually the dude that actually did it. It's the dude that wants to do it, but doesn't have the balls to, right? So I'm like, I am just like so planted myself on on a shelf, being like, I am out of this game. I am never coming back. I'm gone. And Dan's like, "Hey, I got this idea." And he's not the first person to pitch me an idea for some sort of content creation in the space going up to this. And I have certainly was the crusher of hopes and dreams. And he's like, "No, like we're like, you got to check Bo's photography out. And he'd heard me do an interview about me sort of refining myself. He's like, that's the spirit that I want. And like, all right, tell me more. And he's like, and he's going through this, and he's going, suddenly I'm like, yeah, like this is the project, man. Like the 20-year war, like that's such a hook, you know. I mean, even 20yearwar.com, it just rolls off the tongue, right? I mean, it's so, that title encapsulates everything. And I'm like, dude, all right, what do you need from me? He's like, I need your black book. I'm like, he's like, we don't have enough veterans. I need to get the word out. I'm like, say no more. I am so excited, Adam. I'm just jacked up. I type out the first email to Bill Butler, who is the chief of staff for General Retired Farrader at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum in Columbus. I'm like, Billy, you got to check this out. They need some help, like whatever. I don't put a subject line in it. Right? I am just like, boom, and I look at it, I'm like, whoo, like, you know, like, dude, sorry. Like, Bill got back to me in probably 20, 30 minutes. Like, he was like, skates, like, and then the next one I sent out, and I made really, really sure, was to General Votel, who I had been one of his staff NCOs after I'd gotten hurt when I was at my time in the Rangers. And when they deployed to Iraq, I'd been back on family readiness. So I got to know him, and I got to know his family a little bit. I'm like, hey, sir, you know, can you help some Rangers out? And he's like, this is great. Tell me more. And eventually he's writing the foreword to it. And, you know, and they went back and forth, and Bo's out on the road. And then Dan calls me up again. He's like, hey, you want to write this? Because we really, really need we've got these great audio files, but we need a writer. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's do it. Nice. And so, like, I guess I would say this for the audience. Like, the one thing that I'll say is someone who has, you know, done a lot of content creation, who's, you know, Adam, we were talking off air about having worked in, you know, podcast and radio, which I did for 4 years. Like, I've done it. These guys were already insane. They're like, hi, we're going to do a book. We're going to get all the content ready to get a book together in about 3.5 months. Yeah. So it can be released the same year. Like, you walk into Random House or Simon & Schuster, these big print houses, and they're like, get out of my office. Yeah. Like, you guys done missed your deadline by about a year.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, forget it. Let's take the ride. So Bo's on the road. You know, I'm at my day job going back and forth between Chicago and Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I just moved to for the day gig. And I am living in and out of hotels. And I'm like down at the hotel bar, getting like at the Embassy Suites with the free heavy pour, thanks Sherry and La Vista, of the house cab, like grabbing, you know, like in the audio, like typing up all of these files as they're coming in from Bo, you know, just listening to these insane stories. Yeah. Just, I mean, all over the map. And as people keep coming in, and it's just impactful moment after impactful moment. And like some of these names that, you know, you might have heard, and some of these people you have no idea of. And it's just like, oh my God, like this is the project. And, you know, like it's really what Dan said. These are 71 different stories about how, you know, what someone decided to do, like why they decided to serve, a very brief sketch of their service. I mean, we've got some people that, you know, can write and have, frankly, written memoirs about their time in service. And it's just, this is what they did. Then this is what my transition was like. And I think the most important thing is this is what they're doing now. The myth in the United States that the veteran is this broken, battered, beaten down creature is complete garbage. Like, I almost dropped some F-bombs, but I'm not going to do that because we're on radio. It's shattered. And like what you see so many of these men and women are thriving.
Right.
CEOs of millions, multi-million-dollar companies, right? You know, people that are living their dreams, that have embraced their power, entrepreneurship, great jobs. I mean, we've got someone who climbed Mount Everest, who works at McKinsey, like the premier consulting company in the world, and she lives out of her van because she's that badass, right? Like like the veteran is not broken. The veteran is actually thriving, and we're really excited that this book, you know, 20-Year War, shows that.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot because I think it's the veteran stories are not, how do I put this? I don't think they're stories that need to be told more often, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think if we're a community that not only sets an example, but quite frankly, especially in the world that we live in today, I think people could use these stories, and it probably learn from them, and I think the world would probably be a better place.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, there's never been more information accessible, more truth, more knowledge in the world, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like we're getting dumber. And I don't know what that is. Someone smarter than me is gonna have to explain it. There's never been more opportunity in this world to go be an entrepreneur if you want to, if you have the work ethic and if you have the drive. And that's what you see, not just from the 71 men and women that chose to be a part of this book, but just across the community when you get to know a veteran. Like the sad thing is 0.85% of Americans served over the past 2 years. That's not our number. That's the VA's number. Okay. Like all, and the whole 0.45 thing that was a decade ago that we looked at Raindrop, that was the VA's number too. It's just grown. It's just 10 years later.
Yeah.
So less than 1% of the American population served in the longest war on record, the Forever War, is what people are starting to call it. And it's like they don't understand. So you go back to these cliche, tired narratives of, oh, we saw that guy in uniform at the ball game, yay, Captain America, right? Throw out the first pitch, cool. Or, PTSD, which is a real challenge in the community, but that certainly doesn't define the community when you get to know us,
right.
Like you, 3 of the 4 of us are veterans, and all 3 of the veterans on this call right now are entrepreneurs. Out there taking risks, out there in small business, out there trying to positively impact their community, right? Like, and you see that over and over and over and over again. The Greatest Generation wasn't the greatest generation solely because they whooped Hitler's ass, although that helped. It was because they came home and they were pillars of their community. They were the manager of the factory. They were the high school, civics teacher that promoted the lessons of the past so they weren't going to be forgotten. They were the small business owners, the shop owners, the college professors, all of these people. That's why they were the greatest generations, because they came home and they continued to serve their community and continued to give back. And guess what? More veterans than not are doing that. It's just not that's what's being seen. And that, for me, and that was the hook ultimately why I decided to join Dan and Bo with United Valor, which is the parent company to the book, is because that's the mission, is to just show the truth. Like, this is who we are. This is what we want to be. This is where we're going to go. And, forget what you saw from mass media. Forget all this. Listen to the stories of the individuals. Listen to what the veteran is telling you about themselves.
I like that. And that's a good transition to briefly talk about the parent company you had brought up, United Valor. And real quick, those of you, again, if you're listening to the show, open up another browser and go to 20yearwar.com. You can pre-order the book right now, and the book's coming out.
So it'll be released to the general public in September. Anybody who pre-orders now will start shipping books in August, and they'll get it before September 11th. But the general release is September 11th.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about the company We Are United Valor, or United Valor. And if you're online, go to weareunitedvalor.com, because you guys also have a podcast as well, right?
We do. That's right.
Talk a little bit about that.
So the idea of the company as a whole, and then the podcast as well, is, the book is incredible. There's nothing you can draw away from the book other than it's simply stunning, and the photographs are all too telling in it. But you can only put so much of somebody's story on paper,
right?
Especially when you're putting 71 veterans in the same book. So I told Bo, I was like, if we're going to do this, we really need to have longer audio files, whether we create an archive or we do something. And then we were like, well, why don't we just, create a podcast for it? And I was like, let's do it. So we decided to jump into the world of podcasting, trying to dip our toes in the water. But yeah, it's just a matter of, we wanted veterans to have the space and the time to be able to tell their entire story. So again, we go all the way from their combat experience, and these are long formats. So typically, we spend roughly 45 minutes to an hour getting their combat stories and what it was like to serve and wear the uniform and everything. And then the last hour to 45 minutes is talking about what their transition was like and what they're doing now and how they're thriving today. And, you know, the life lessons they've carried with them along the way. And you know, we also ask them a really important question. Almost every single veteran we ask is, you know, what advice do you have for veterans, or what advice do you have for transitioning veterans, or what advice do you have for entrepreneurial veterans? Just trying to get their experience, because we validate the person throughout the podcast, and then we make sure that people take away something from them.
Right.
And that's kind of the intent of the podcast. And the podcast is called Never Left Behind. And right now we're on, I think, just the 3 major platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
And I'm willing to bet you're probably on a lot more than that, just with all the different feeds.
Yeah,
and
probably.
But,
sure.
that's where you guys listen. So if you want to listen to their podcast, folks, go to the homepage, weareunitedvalor.com. You can also pre-order the book from there and listen to the podcast from the website there. You're on a show called The Decision Hour, and we've talked, you know, every day we make decisions. Name a time in your guys' life where your feet were on the line, you had to make that decision. And maybe the decision was to come forth and put this book together. And before I have you guys answer that, I want to take a step back for a minute and just tip of the hat to you 3 for doing what you do and telling the stories that need to be told. You guys are creating really a history book that will stand to the end of time to talk about something that's happened in our country, that can only be told by those that lived it, and that's what you guys are doing. So my hat's off to you gentlemen for taking on this project and thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you. We're just happy to share it with the world, and we appreciate even just you having us on to talk more about it.
Absolutely. So decisions. Let's talk about a decision that you've had to make in your life. What was it? And what was the atmosphere like at that time? Tom, let's start with you.
So mine, within a year of leaving Ranger Up, my now ex-wife also left me. I was in the next job after that. I thought was going to be a great fit. It was horrible. Everything was completely and totally sideways. I went from 18, I'm an Army Ranger, 24, I'm at a top 50 school, and I'm also got a full-time job working in commercial radio as a morning show guy, right? From there, I immediately pivot in the middle of the recession to Ranger Up and rocket ship and pioneer the veteran lifestyle aerospace, right? Like, I am flying high. I'm, mid 30s. The world is just like, and I really got very, very lost in that, morning show shtick meets Tommy Bat Boy persona type stuff. And like, the karmic scales came back for about 2.5 years and just decided to bludgeon me. And I was not in a good place. And I made this, I was sitting there like, well, I just gotten fired from this job that I hated, right? But the way that happened really rubbed me salty. And I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? Like, I am completely I am flat on my back, just getting dominated like Tim Kennedy beating me up on the jiu-jitsu mats for 10 rounds. Like, I mean, that's how I feel. And I made the decision that, like, it was time to get right with myself. And so I grabbed a 40-liter backpack. I sold out my equity stake in Ranger Up, and I spent 5 months, and I traveled all the way around the world just with a backpack. And I mean, look, people are like, oh, well, that's got to be like the Trojan horse way to tell a full story. Like, look, it was cool. Like, don't get me wrong, but I did it because I was not right with myself. There were so many things that were not okay in my life. And I knew that in order to try and start fixing 20 years of just like build up, I guess, plaque, I needed the space to like process all of it. I needed to deal with the fact that, my ex left. I need, for someone else. I needed to deal with the fact that, Nick and I are still super cool at Ranger Up. He's still one of my best friends in the world. But at that time, we just had different ideas on how to run this business that we had both just gone all in on, right? So for me, that was the decision. And honestly, there was no way on earth I would have been capable of being empathetic enough and understanding enough and caring enough about all of these veteran stories, or willing enough, frankly, to come back to the community if I had done that. And I'm in such a better place in my life personally. And I don't think that you ever stop serving. And for me, my calling is to tell stories in this space. I've realized that through this project. But I was never going to get there if I didn't just pull the ripcord and say, yo, you are not okay. And you need to go find a way to like chill out and be okay, or you're going to really do something dumb.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Tom. Wow. Whew. Dan, what about you?
So if I could tell two stories, but they're kind of connected to each other, so that's why they're kind of two. So my first is when I enlisted. So when I enlisted, I was 17. I graduated high school early. Had to get my parents' approval for me to enlist. And when I first went to the recruiter to make that decision, I told him, I was like, my mom won't let me do anything dangerous. I was like, so I have to do something. I was like, she won't sign the papers if it's dangerous. So I was like, what's exciting but not too dangerous? And they were like, well, you could be a parachute rigger, because then you can at least jump out of planes, and that's exciting, but you're not on the front line. I was like, perfect. That sounds great. So I did the delayed entry program, went to, MEPS the first time, did all my initial physical, came back a few months later to actually sign my paperwork to enlist. And when I sat down, I remember sitting down, I think he was with a major or something like that at the time. And he was like, son, I don't know what to tell you, but that job, parachute rigger, isn't available anymore. And I was like, uh-oh. He was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, what was the other airborne job that you had on that list? And he was like, Airborne Ranger. I was like, yeah, I'll do that one. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Zero idea. So that was obviously a pretty huge decision. But, I grew up playing sports and skateboarding and doing all these other things. And I think I was too dumb to ever quit anything. So that's why I got all the way through, ended up at Ranger Battalion. Honestly, I feel like I ended up being a pretty good Ranger at the time. Became a squad leader in, I think, right at 4 years or something like that. E6 in a little over 4 years. And then I went to the advanced leader course, and I used to be an incredible runner. Everybody in the platoon would call me a gazelle because I would just try and break people off, and that was my thing to do, was just run as fast as I could and just get people to fall out. But I was running at ALC, and I started having chest pains and didn't really know what it was, and was trying to figure out, what happened. And I fell out of my first run I've ever fallen out of. And they scooped me up, the cadre did, and took me to the hospital. I told them what was going on. Started going through a series of tests and everything to figure out what was happening with me, and found out that I had a atrial septal defect, which, a lot of people actually have them growing up, have them as infants, and they don't really know anything about it, but they can get worse later in life due to stress and excessive, cardio and things like that, overworking your heart. So that's what they told me. And they said, this is something that, you really have to think about, and how it's going to affect you and how you want to do things. And I had another deployment coming up. And I was like, well, I'm about to deploy, so obviously I'm not making a decision right now. I didn't realize like how bad it was. And then me and, my wife just kept going back and forth. Am I going to enlist? Am I going to stay in and, keep trying to fight this or whatever, or am I going to get out? And ultimately we made a decision. It was a smart decision at the time to get out. It's not worth risking, especially your heart.
Right.
It's the thing that's keeping you alive. So, what's really interesting about that whole sequence of events and decision is, I didn't really talk about it. My medics and doctors I feel like kind of not swept it under the rug, but kind of kept it quiet, because I later found out, I read David Goggins' book, and he had the same exact issue. He had ASD. His was a little bit more severe than me, but he got med boarded because of it. And they didn't even bring that up to me as an option or that it was that big of an issue. So they kind of just, were like, well, you could stay a Ranger, or you can make the decision to get out. So it's just interesting how the whole sequence happened. But the decision to get out was a smart one. What was the dumb decision was when I decided to get out, I felt like I lost my identity. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not a veteran anymore. I'm just going to be a civilian. And so I didn't, play the veteran card at all. I hated going to veteran events. I didn't connect with a lot of my old buddies that I served with. I really pushed a lot of it off, and it took, basically 8 years for me to come back around and say, you know what, that was a dumb decision.
It happens to quite a few veterans, I think, more often than most people realize.
Mhm.
I can definitely, definitely relate to that. Bo, what about you?
I think again, I go back to the beginning, like comparing my story to these guys. I just enjoy being around not only Dan and Tom for veterans, but hearing all these stories and getting to know these men and women in the book to me are just light years ahead of myself. But when I look at the decision that I made that ultimately changed my life is really cutting out being a fashion photographer. I think when you're surrounded in certain lifestyles like that, I started becoming somebody who I wasn't, hanging out with people who I just go into like fashion events and, pretending to be somebody that I wasn't. And it was slowly affecting like my family and my friends around me. And I kind of had to come to full circle and realize that even though I was making good money in that space, it wasn't something that I wanted to do the rest of my life. And so I knew that I wanted to be more on the photojournalistic side of things. I wanted to somehow take my talent as a photographer and storyteller and basically help, not so cliche, change lives, but just help share the stories of people around the world and in different capacities. And I knew that by making that decision to leave, Los Angeles and move my life to North Carolina and being around my childhood friend Dan and meeting Tom and working on this project, I hate to bring it around to everything around this book, but I got to be honest, Adam, I think all three of us can agree that we have spent like blood, sweat, and tears in putting into this book, and we care about it so much. And I think that after I've gotten to photograph and interview these veterans, and I can now call them, my friends, it's really, I would say, life-changing for myself to take a step back from being that fashion photographer and actually focus on a project that is helping, shape lives, or it's helping to get out there and show other photographers or artists that if you want to do something that's impactful, don't just focus on the money and the selfish reasons of being behind it, but get out there and photograph and interview people that can help boost your career and help boost their lives.
Well, and I haven't even told these guys this because this just happened to me last night. But my roommate, when I was in college, who was a vet, lives in Houston, and knows a couple of small business guys. Same thing. Our Fox and Friends, it's the one big piece of press that we've done. But Cooper, I was like, yeah, man, here's the link, and this is the book, and this is what we're doing. He's like, that's awesome. He came back and he said that one of the guys that he knows that owns like a small scrapyard and stuff, um, that interview about the book led to a really long conversation they had about veterans and their opportunity. And so he's going to start trying to find more vets to hire into the scrapyard.
Wow.
Just because he's like, I like that work ethic. It's kind of grimy, blue collar work, but and Cooper's like, yeah, man. And, he's, already connected him to some local people and things like that. And, again, like that's the ripples in the pond that you just don't know. But I think that it starts with being authentic and showing who we are, not accepting these narratives that other people have given us.
I love it, and I will go as far as to say is that I appreciate that you guys made the decision to put this book together, and the stories that need to be told, and quite frankly, Tom, you just said it right there. It's a book that's already, it's not even available yet. It's available for pre-order, and simply go to 20yearwar.com. to order the order right now, but you're ultimately potentially creating jobs just talking about it.
Mhm.
I hope so. I did play the veteran card on LinkedIn, and that didn't really help, if I'm being honest. I had one interview where the HR rep, where I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, you absolutely cannot ask me these questions." And then she's the offended one, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
like, okay, you just asked literally like 5 major HIPAA violations
Yeah.
about my mental health,
Yeah.
ma'am. Okay, because I checked a box. Like,
Yeah.
let's pump the
Let
brakes.
me educate you on how this
Right.
interview is going to go.
Right, and then of course you can imagine how well that call that went out.
I didn't get the job. Huh, surprised. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Funny, how'd that work? But it's the I think that you can make this statement, is that when you have different groups of people that you don't understand, okay, different cultural touchstones that you don't understand, there's fear, right?
Right.
And when there's fear, you're going to go to cliches and you're going to go to stereotypes, because those are the things that you can understand. Like, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's one that's necessary. Stereotypes exist for a reason.
Right.
I'm not saying they're accurate all the time or that they're not outdated in some cases. I certainly can make a lot of case that both those are true for veterans, but they exist for a reason. And so it's incumbent upon you, if you are part of that group and part of that community, to change the stereotype, not expect, in the case of the post GWAT veteran, 99.15% of Americans, sure, let me wave that magic wand and expect you guys to do something if I don't put the work in.
Right.
Like, but guess what? Speaking only for the veteran community, which is the one I'm a part of, we are some of the hardest working per capita. We're more entrepreneurial inclined. We're more creative. We're more adaptable. We do better in school. When we do finally find that fit in that company, we outperform our peers. Like, this is all small business, government, SBA and VA data. Like, I got receipts for this, right?
Right.
That's the narrative. That's the message. So, but the thing is that we've got to remember, it's not on them. It's not. You want to talk about a decision, I would, this being the decision now, I would encourage every veteran listening to this to make the decision to educate the people around you. Because if you don't show who you really are, and you don't stop playing into these stereotypes, you're not helping yourself and you're not helping the community.
Mhm.
That's the real work, and it's hard work, and it sucks. And there have been plenty of times, even through the process of this book, where I'm like, God damn, Batman, like, really, we're gonna do this again. It's been 20 years. We're gonna do it. The three of us will do it thousands and thousands of times, because we have to, because that's the work. But guess what? One interview through a friend, and suddenly veterans have opportunity in Houston. What happens when we talk to someone in Chicago, where I grew up? What happens, if we end up running into some random, iBanker nonprofit rich dude in Connecticut, right? And suddenly he's like, you never know, but you've got to do the work.
Right.
Mhm.
I love it. Gentlemen, I appreciate you guys' time today. Any parting words for the listeners?
No, we're just we're grateful to be on Decision Hour, obviously, and we're excited for people to buy our book at 20yearwar.com and listen to our podcast too, Never Left Behind, and just hear these stories, read these stories, and learn from them.
Love it. Again, guys, thank you very much for taking time out of your guys' busy day to share your stories and the great work that you guys are doing. Folks, if you want to pre-order the book, this is one that you're going to want in your home. 20yearwar.com. Open up a browser, go to the website, place your order right now. Do it now. I'll have all this stuff in the show notes. Before we let you go, shout out to our parent network, Heroes Media Group. Make sure you go check out all the shows over there and all the stuff that they're doing. Yeah, over there. Go check it out, heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.